안녕하세요.
Good
저는
afternoon,
이클레이
ladies and
한국사무소의
gentlemen. I am Park Yeon-hee,
박연희입니다.
Director of ICLEI Korea Office. From now on, we will open the EU-Korea Urban Mobility Forum with the theme of transition towards net zero. Today's forum is being held both online and offline, and we have participants who are being here with us online. And we are holding this forum on the site of Hwaseong City. And especially we are in a library which has been newly established for the first time among public libraries in Korea. This library is Energy Zero building. While having the forum, we will show you the scenery around the library. And the significant meaning of the building and the forum will be understood very well while you're participating in this forum. We are cooperating with local governments in Korea to achieve the transport mobility transition in cities in Korea. Today's forum is part of the EU-Korea Eco-Mobility Forum. We are cooperating with the EU, and now we are holding this forum in Hwaseong City. In this forum, we are cooperating with this forum is actually being held jointly by Korea EU Climate Action, ICLEI Korea Office, and Hwaseong City. Some announcements for you before we start the forum. Actually, you can choose whether you will listen to the forum in English or Korean. Today we have both. We have speakers who will speak in Korean or in English. All presentations and discussions will be translated simultaneously. From the very beginning to the end of the forum, all content will be broadcasted through our online webinar channel. And presentation materials of this forum could be downloaded from the ICLEI Korea website. And while you're participating in the forum, you can download the presentation materials. If you're interested, please feel free to download the presentation materials to listen to the presentations more effectively. And we look forward to receiving your comments and feedback. We are having this forum online, and on site we have a few staff and we have some Korean speakers. But it's very important to reflect your opinions. So please please feel comfortable with posting any comments or questions online. We will take your questions online. Now we're going to start the forum. As we start the forum, we will listen to the remarks from those who have helped us host this forum. The first speaker is Her Excellency Maria Castillo Fernandez, the Ambassador of EU Delegation to Korea. Now we are having EU-Korea Urban Mobility Forum, so on behalf of the EU, the Ambassador of EU Delegation to Korea will give you a greeting remarks.
Good morning, Europe. 안녕하세요, Korea. Many thanks to Mayor of Hwaseong City, Mr. Cheol-mo, to our colleagues from the ICLEI Korea, and to all participants. Welcome to the EU-Korea Urban Mobility Forum. And hope we will have a very good discussion called Transition Towards Net Zero. This is under the program of EU-Korea Climate Action Project, which started in 2018 and supports Korean transition towards more low-carbon economy. It complements what we are doing at governmental level with our policy dialogue, but also our engagement with civil society organizations, urban stakeholders, local authorities, academia, business, and youth in Korea. Fighting global climate requires local action. and that's very important. Inclusive and bottom-up approaches where city, local authorities, youth are key partners, also in our program EU-Korea Climate Action. Supporting cities and local authorities is very important in this energy transition because we all know that up to 75% of global CO2 emissions are originated in cities, in buildings, in transport. So therefore, we need ambitious plans. Korea and the European Union have pledged carbon neutrality by 2050. We have the Korean deal, the EU Green Deal, together trying to leverage green and digital transitions. Within these transitions, the transport play a very important role. We know that to reduce transport-related green gas, we have to have very ambitious targets. And the European Union has pledged 90% of these reductions by 2050. This is a fundamental revolution and a very ambitious target. We try to increase the uptake of zero-emission vehicles, making sustainable alternative solutions that are available to public and business, supporting digitalization and automatization as well, but most important, improving connectivity and access. And for that, we require the support and the engagement of citizens in this transition planning. We have heard, and we are going to hear today about European citizens. What is their experience? What do they do? And most of all, what are their sustainable urban mobility plans, which are the key aspects to satisfy mobility needs from people and business, but also very important to improve our quality of life in cities. Let me give you a concrete example. Promoting cycling in cities. This is a very important feature of our sustainable urban mobility plans. Commuting by bicycle reduces not only CO2, but also air and noise pollution. It reduces road congestion and traffic, and most of all, it is healthy. That is what Malmö, Sweden cycle capital, did. They have managed to reduce already 25% of traffic only with bicycles. That is a very important target. And we will hear about their experience and much more. So please stay tuned, don't disconnect, and I hope you had a very interesting discussion in finding solutions towards this transition towards net zero. 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
예, 고맙습니다.
Thank you so much. So actually, why we are organizing this forum, what is the importance of local cities and how important to make great innovation in urban transportation. That was mentioned by Your Excellency, the Ambassador. Next, we are going to invite the Mayor of Hwaseong City, Cheol-mo. He is representing the city of Hwaseong, and also he is representing eco-mobility in ICLEI networks. So he is the EXCO member, and also he is making great effort in order to innovate urban transportations. So ICLEI at the Korean office actually launched M-Lead, and the Mayor Cheol-mo is representing M-Lead as well. So now we are going to invite the Mayor Cheol-mo. He is going to deliver special messages.
자, 여러분들 마음속에 박수.
So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Cheol-mo. Hello, I'm Mayor of the city of Hwaseong, Cheol-mo. It is my great pleasure to have an occasion to share Korea and EU's eco-mobility policies and cases here in a sustainable future-oriented city, Hwaseong. Your Excellency Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez, and Director of ICLEI Korea Park Yeon-hee, and MLEAD member cities, and those who are with us today via online platform in Korea and in other European cities, I'd like to express my greetings to every one of you. We are experiencing a period of great climate transition. It requires completely different perception on our lives. This forum will be the opportunity to expand the horizon of our thought and what challenges we need to take and what should be changed and how we could be changed for a sustainable future. In addition, it is expected to discuss concrete practical measures for carbon neutrality in the era of a climate crisis. The venue hosting this forum is Hwaseong's the Wangbaek Green Forest Library. This is Korea's first zero energy public building, where 100% of renewable energy used in this building is self-produced. As if finding the possibility of realizing carbon neutrality in a library where wisdom from the past and for the future is filled, we will find the possibility of realizing carbon neutrality on the road through eco-mobility. We will make our best effort to make a free transportation that initiated in Hwaseong, Dangjin, and many other local the government move toward eco-mobility. Based on the various opinions gathered on today's forum, Hwaseong will strengthen our eco-mobility policies, and based on joint effort with our citizens, we will build a foothold to advance to sustainable city. Thank you for putting a great effort to make this forum possible. I'm looking forward to hear your insight and wisdom. Thank you.
예, 고맙습니다. 여러분 다 같이 박수.
Thank you. Please give them a big round of applause. In the opening session, we have a keynote presentation. As you may have understood from the two speakers' comments, mobility in city and innovating such system in city has been very important task being implemented at national and local government level. 2030 Net Zero and Green New Deal policy emphasizes the importance of transport policy transition in cities. To achieve this, Korean local governments are trying to make a change and transition in the public transport system. And we have been thinking about how we can realize free public transport system. And in today's forum, we will focus on the innovation of public transport and free public transport and how such transport systems would bring innovation and improvement in urban life. So the first presentation will be made by Mr. Kim Sang-chul, Chairperson of Public Transport Network Policy Committee. He will talk about the innovation of public transport system and free public transport, and he has been writing a lot of papers about this theme. And Hwaseong City Mayor read a book written by Mr. Kim Sang-chul and recommended that book about public transport system to many acquaintances. So public officials and relevant stakeholders would be able to get important insight from the presentation, and we will see how the free public transport could be implemented as an important policy tool. So let me invite Mr. Kim Sang-chul for the keynote presentation. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Thank you for introducing about the public transport network. We are cooperating with environment groups and the groups advocating the people with disabilities. In order to enhance the public good of the public transport system, I have been working hard at the Public Transport Network Policy Committee. Free public transport is not just about eliminating cost, but about adjusting various relations of interest and making a true transition. Under COVID-19 and climate crisis, we are faced with important challenges. Firstly, during the COVID-19 period, is public transportation really safe? This is the question many people ask. And we also come to face the question whether we have no choice but to replace traditional transportation means with personal mobility. So is it correct that the era of traditional mass transit is over? And the last question we are faced with is whether the electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles are effective to respond to climate crisis. And there's a fundamental question we need to answer. What does mobility mean to human beings, and how do we have to ensure mobility? In this regard, when we discuss free public transport, I'd like to start from the very simple question. Please have a look at this book. As this book title says, why don't we pay to ride elevators? Actually, the picture you see here is a big building lying sideways. Elevator moves vertically, but this picture is not vertical but horizontal. Then the way elevator moves around looks very similar to the way public transportation means move. In urban areas, mobility is an essential element. If mobility is not ensured in cities, people cannot continue their lives. So in urban area, mobility is not an option, but a compulsory means to make travel. So mobility is one of the most important elements in the urban ecosystem, and mobility would be one of the basic rights of our citizens. So free public transport is not just about eliminating cost, but free public transport is about what kind of burden do we need to lift from our citizens by considering their life in urban areas. In the free public transport project, one of the most important fact is that the free public transport policy will be implemented in various urban areas. And we need to consider various specific unique features of Korean transportation system when we discuss free public transport. So in order to make transition towards free public transport system in Korea, we have to consider the three unique aspects that you can see in Korea. The first aspect is that in the case of bus, the bus operating system is privatized in Korea. That may be different from overseas countries. In Korea, basically, public transportation system is dependent on private sector. In foreign countries, the routes are public property, but in Korea, the routes are privatized. So the private sector creates and sells routes for transport. Such routes are being protected by law as private asset. So there's private license to the routes. There is no renewal process, but the inheritance and transactions are possible over the private license over, for example, bus operating system. So in order to realize free public transport system in Korea, we must consider the very unique feature of Korean public transportation system that is dependent on private sector. In Korea, we have various support and subsidies system. For example, we have quasi-public bus operating system. Many people criticize this system. And as we are faced with COVID-19 and climate crisis, we should be able to operate the public transport system in a more flexible manner. But because of the future in Korea, where the public transportation system relies on private sector, we need to remember this aspect. And secondly, in Korea, there is inequality and gap in mobility between cities and rural areas. I'm going to touch on this in more detail in other slides, but when we think about free public transport and transitional public transportation system, we must consider the inequality and gap in mobility between urban areas and non-urban areas. In the case of the regions that have less access to public transport, they may have different position on this matter. And in Korea, one of the biggest problems in public transport policy is that we are just trying to replace the type of fuel in our response to climate crisis. Actually, the Korean government has been focusing on changing the fuel of public transportation modes as a way to respond to climate crisis. That is related to the specific industries in Korea, but such passive response to climate crisis has been delaying the realization of free public transport system in Korea. So, to discuss and implement free public transport, we have to correctly understand the three unique aspects of Korea in terms of the public transport system. As for climate crisis, we are taking common sense based approach. We have to reduce the entire miles traveled. The most important task in our response to climate crisis includes not just changing the type of fuel, but also increasing the portion of public transport and reducing the entire miles traveled by citizens. Paris has the vision of such cities, and LA has Sustainable City Plan. Paris has this Declaration for Paris. The key point is that we should not only change the type of fuel, but also reduce the entire miles traveled. For example, the key point of the 15-minute city is that basic infrastructure must be installed in cities so that people can move from somewhere to elsewhere in 15 minutes in one city in Paris. So this is about eliminating unnecessary miles traveled and help people have more efficient means of travel. So our response to climate crisis is a complicated one. But Korean cities are not sufficiently prepared to do take these measures. For example, from 2004, for 10 years, Seoul Metropolitan City Government replaced the fuel of Seoul's intercity bus with natural gas to reduce the bad air quality. That gave us positive effect in terms of reducing the amount of fine dust. However, fuel replacement had limited effect in terms of reducing the entire greenhouse gas emission. That was actually confirmed. And at the end of last year, there was C40 deadline 2020, and Seoul Metropolitan Government submitted the reduction target, but that reduction target was very limited. As you see in the diagram below, in Korea, the greenhouse gas emission from passenger cars is very high. Compared to taxi and bus, passenger cars are emitting more CO2 emission. And so far, we don't have effective measure to reduce such greenhouse gas emission from passenger cars. Even Seoul Metropolitan City Government has not correctly established the effective policy to reduce greenhouse gas emission in its transport policy. So this is the question we need to ask when we talk about free public transport. So how do we reduce the individual travel or movement distance? In other words, how can we convert the passenger car users into public transport users? In Korea, there is social expense for using passenger cars and the amount of tax passenger car users need to pay. So would you refer to the graph? As of 2018, in Korea, still using passenger car gives you less tax burden. So using passenger car is more beneficial than using public transport in terms of the amount of tax that the passenger car users should pay. And under the free public transport system, we need to bring back the benefit to the citizens who use public transport. So in Korea, free public transport is not just about giving subsidies to citizens, but we need to actually change the type of social benefit or expense benefit people enjoy from using passenger car. And surrounding the public transportation, we have social conflict because the workers who work in the bus or transportation facilities, they are under aggravating labor conditions or working conditions. So bus laborers or subway workers are under aggravating labor conditions, and they have incentive to raise the fare. And the Seoul city government has so far raised the fare of public transport system to resolve the conflict related to the bus workers and subway workers. So there is various financial burden and pressure the city government has felt, but raising the fare is not the fundamental answer. From last year, because of the crisis caused by COVID-19, the demand for public transport decreased, and the Seoul city government that operated the public transportation system suffered deficit. So the transportation facilities and bus and subway operating private bodies suffered deficit due to COVID-19, and they are putting pressure on the city government to increase the fare. So if the public government should bear the burden, then they need to increase their control over the public transportation system and control the cost as well. So if you look at the diagram below, there are two things. First of all, the users pay the fare, and secondly, the government pays the finance. Here, the finance refers to the financial resources, the tax money paid by the users. So there are two types of burden. Direct burden, which means that citizens pay money for using public transport, and the second indirect burden is on the city government. And in Korea, in terms of the public transport structure, the citizens pay more burden. They bear more burden in terms of the money they pay for using public transport. So free public transport system has a significant meaning, not only in terms of environment, but also in terms of solving conflicts in the society. So we can use various options like congestion fee and other options people can take instead of using passenger cars. Actually, if we look at the climate crisis, the reward policy may be effective. Although there could be some differences by region, if we just transform the combustion engine vehicles into electric vehicles, that will not sufficiently reduce the amount of CO2 emitted from transport. What is the most important task in transport sector? The most important task is to reduce the total miles traveled. In reducing the total miles traveled cannot be achieved just by changing the type of energy source and fuel. We need to, of course, make transition towards eco-friendly fuels, but also implement the free public transport system. In this regard, there is one thing we need to consider to have people accept free public transport system. In the end of last year, Korean National Assembly held a gathering on Green New Deal, and they conducted a questionnaire survey to the people of Korea. They asked people, if the public transport is made free of charge, would you use it for travel? And 57.9% of the respondents said that if public transport is made free of charge, then I would be willing to use it. But 51% of the people said that I am not going to use public transport even if it is made free of charge because it is not convenient to use public transport and I don't have the public transport available to the destination I want. Here, the chart shows the daily transport expense of residents in Gyeonggi Province. The blue one is the cost people pay for using bus, and the red bar means the cost people pay for using passenger cars. As you see in the graph, the people's daily public transport expense is quite high compared to the cost of using passenger car. In Korea, we have KTX, the railway system, but across the region, we have weak connectivity between metropolitan transport among metropolitan transport systems. For example, the road network is not sufficiently connected with railway network. So when we talk about the free public transport policy, this is not just about doing something free of charge, but we need to make more sophisticated Green New Deal investment. So this is not just about giving subsidies. And we also need to consider the vulnerable road users. We need to think about how we can include the vulnerable road users, including people with disabilities, in the free public transport system. In this regard, the free public transport policy could be the most effective policy to ensure the citizens' rights to mobility, which is the very essential right in urban areas. And free public transport policy would be the key to innovating Korean existing public transportation policies. I hope that the free public transport policies will spread across Korea and offer better service to the citizens and respond better to the climate crisis. Thank you for your presentation. Have you heard of the innovation in public transport system? After listening to the presentation, I believe you may now be more familiar with free public transport and public transport innovation. In Korean, we say public transport, but later on we mention mobility more often. So we need to focus on the issue from the perspective of the citizens. So we need to reform the mobility system in a way that is good for our citizens. We have not yet received any comments online, but we will continue the forum till 6 p.m. today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post your comments or questions. And based on the keynote presentation, we will further explore how other cities in Korea and in other countries conduct free public transport systems and what kind of implications can we get from those examples. These will be discussed. Mr. Kim Sang-chul, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. And based on his keynote presentation, we will continue our other presentations and discussion.
Without break, we are going to have our second session. So what kind of efforts are made by local governments? Regarding that, we are going to have our discussions in the second session. In this session, we are going to invite 3 speakers who will introduce their own cases. The first presentation will be delivered from the Hungary Budapest. So Sustainable Urban Mobility in Budapest, that is a title of a presentation. So how the Budapest is doing the urban and the transportation innovation, that will be discussed. So for this, we are going to invite Mr. Samu Balogh from the Budapest, the city, the cabinet. So, well, actually we have a video clip, so let's meet him through video clip.
Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. If I'm right, it's in the afternoon where you are listening to me. Thank you for having us. Thank you for the opportunity to present a few slides about Budapest, capital of Hungary. I'm Samu Balogh, and I'm serving as the head of cabinet for the mayor of Budapest. And I'm also responsible for supervising urban planning processes in the city, and also BKK, which is the public transport manager of the city. And I will be talking about BKK and its achievements in the past few years in the next 15 minutes. Let me show you this slideshow. Yes, if I'm correct now, it's working and you see what I see, which is the beginning of the slide. Okay, let's start. So I will be talking about the sustainable urban mobility in Budapest, and mainly about BKK, which is the transport mobility authority of the city. First, a few dimensions of Budapest. Budapest is the capital city of the country, and the only one which has more than 1 million inhabitants. In fact, it has 1.75 million inhabitants, and if you are counting the urban suburban agglomeration as well, it's almost 3 million. The city is divided to 2 parts by the river Danube, and it has a very complex 2-tier municipal system. which means that we have 23 municipal districts and also one municipality for the city, the whole city as one, and I'm working at the city municipality. The municipality of Budapest owns BKK, which is the public transport center of the city, and it is responsible for managing public transport, and also it's creating the strategic level of all kind of mobility services in the city. BKK has contracts with several operators which are providing services in different areas such as public transport, taxi driving facilities, services, also managing and maintaining the road network of the city. This is a slide of a few images from the previous century, and I think it's nothing new for European cities. You can see at the beginning of the previous century, Budapest, just like other European cities, was mainly a city for people on foot, pedestrians, and on bicycles, which was developing further during the century. And at the second half, we were seeing a very developed public transport system based on one of the most dense tram network of the world, which clearly changed at the end of the previous century, and motorized traffic took over more and more in the city, which created a very problematic transport network with congestions all the time. During the last 2 decades, we started to move further from this side, and just like other European cities, providing more and more spaces for the pedestrians and cyclists. However, it's still a long way to go, because in the big scale, we couldn't achieve a systematic change in the mobility pattern. We are still witnessing growing number of cars, growing number of pollution regarding to transport. So we have still a lot to do in this regard, but the direction is clear for us. You can see how different aspects are working in the city. So public transport is a very diverse one in Budapest, because we are operating several metro lines, subway lines, also tram lines, and trolley buses as well. Of course, we are operating a lot of bus lines, but also BKK is managing the strategic level of cycling infrastructure and road infrastructure. It is a new task for us to integrate the different ways of shared mobility, just like car sharing facilities, but we are also managing a public bike sharing system, which is also part of the portfolio of BKK. Let me tell you a few words about our Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. This is the so-called Budapesti Mobility Plan. It's more like a process, we believe. It's not only about infrastructure or the projects that we are implementing in these years, but it's more about a never-ending process of evaluating, monitoring, and planning our next steps. This is how we are creating the next year's goals and also the next year's projects here in Budapest, but it's also, of course, a known methodology for other cities in Europe as well. The main strategic goals of this plan is providing more connections, providing attractive vehicles, providing better services, and an efficient governance. And it's pretty clear that providing something is in the core of our goals and our work, and it is because we think that we shouldn't think only about passengers and customers, but partners, about the people who are using our daily services. It's also very important that it's not only those who are using the actual trams or subways, but also those who are just walking on the street or driving their cars in the city. They are also our partners. So we have a very integrated model of how to look at things in the city, and it is focused on the people who are using our services in daily basis. Here you can see an example, a good example from the city center. Actually, it's the very main and most centric area of the city. This is how it developed in the last, let's say, 1 decade. You can see more green, you can see wider pedestrian areas, also a cycling infrastructure, and less lanes for cars. And of course, we can show pretty much nice examples from this decade. But as I told you before, we are still struggling to achieve a systematic change in the entire mobility network of the city. Just a few examples for the next years, what we are planning to do. One is one new goal is for the new government is creating a safe and connected network of bicycle lanes. We are achieving a cycle highway network by 2030 with 130 kilometers. This is a very ambitious goal, but we are trying to achieve this, and we believe in it, that it is very important to provide a safe and connected network for people, and this will make them try and use bicycle on a daily basis. Of course, it is very important to provide the same level of service on the main network as the basic network as well, but this cycle highway network is functioning like a flagship project of the city. Also, what is in our focus in the past 1 year and in the next 4 years is traffic calming and providing safe and less noisy environment for people living in the city. We are trying to reduce the traffic as a whole, and using the main road network for serving this traffic and providing safety and healthy streets for those who are living in these areas. Best practices, clearly you can see not only infrastructure projects, but more like events and happenings where we can engage people to these new goals. We see that clearly the most difficult part of this transition is not only creating these new environments, but also engaging people with these goals. Because of course everyone wants a nice and friendly environment, but when it comes to decisions, and for example, if we want to provide more green trees in the city's streets, or for example bicycle lanes, we have to decide what to reduce, and many times we have to redesign the shape of cities and reduce the space given to cars and parking. And this is a very difficult task in Budapest as well, just like in other cities. And we have to engage people with these ideas. And with such events, we are trying to provide that temporary use and different use of the streets and the spaces is good for people. And this is how we are trying to engage people. You can see some very popular events when we are trying to show a different aspect of the city. But also we have to start it early, and education and training is a very important part of our work. in the past few years, we started new partnerships with the education system, with the schools, and providing educational programs for the children to improve or in the early stages their knowledge about how sustainable mobility works in the city, and we are aiming to make them more friendly with this kind of transport modes. Good examples. I already told you a few about good examples of infrastructure and how we turned the different urban spaces to a more friendly and sustainable ones. But what we are actually very proud of from the last 1 year is how we are experimenting a new kind of way of using space. Here in this picture, you can see how we opened this parts of the city, the embankment of the river Danube for pedestrians and cyclists during the weekends. This is truly a new experiment of people, because this space is only used by cars, usually on usual days. But it was very popular and still very popular every weekend when we are opening these parts and these sections of the Danube embankment. And also, of course, it's following an example of Lyon and Paris from France, for example. The opportunities we are seeing, we have a lot to do in digitalization and providing more reliable services for people. And our vision for 2030 is continuing with traffic calming and changing the whole set of the urban mobility model split, providing more and achieving more public transport, active and micromobility, and reducing somehow the share of the motorized traffic in the network of Budapest. And yeah, this is it. It's almost 15 minutes. So thank you for your attention. I hope when we are at the end of this pandemic, we will see you in Budapest and we can show you our achievements in real life. So thank you. And I wish you a nice day during this conference.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
교통 관련한 체계의 이제 전반적인
So actually, he is in charge of urban transportation and urban planning as well. Actually, we had a great time to meet him through video clips. And actually, we had a great time to see the programs implemented in Budapest. So actually, we are quite familiar with those programs. And he introduced the well-focused areas and various programs which are currently implemented in Budapest. And actually, according to the desire of the users, and we can provide different the options and different services. And actually, his presentation, he divided the people into passengers and customers and partners. And I believe that is quite the impressive approach and quite interesting the approach indeed. And actually, in his presentation, he shared 4 different the images of Budapest, which has been changes over time. I would like to invite the second speaker from the EU. So he's here with us on a real-time basis. The second presentation is about free public transport in Europe. How are European cities implementing free public transport services? The overall outline of free public transport and case examples of various cities will be presented. I would like to invite Reggie, the senior officer of ICLEI European Secretariat. This person is in charge of the overall transport-related mobility activities in Europe.
So, Senior Officer Reggie has met with various citizens in Europe and has insightful information to deliver to us. We have the senior officer online with us now. Now, Europe is under Easter day season, but he's here with us. Thank you very much for your time and presentation. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Okay, Reggie, the floor is
Thank
yours.
you very much, and good morning from Freiburg in southwest Germany, and I understand good afternoon or good evening to yourselves in Korea. We've woken up with a covering of snow this morning, which is quite interesting as we've had really good weather, but I hope it's more satisfactory where you are. So I'm going to give an overview of various different examples of free public transport in Europe, and I will say free and subsidized transport to put it in its wider context. And I will be echoing, I think, a lot of the messages that you've heard in the keynote speaker and the presentation from Budapest. I work on a lot of Horizon 2020 European Commission funded projects, and one of them we've recently started is Fast Track. Budapest are also a partner in this project, and we'll be looking at public transport innovations such as free public transport within that project. And I'll mention how you can follow the work that we're doing towards the end of the presentation. So if I just move slides. So I'm going to give a basic introduction to free transport typologies, give some examples of strategic schemes in the European Union, provide some lessons, and also provide some links and contacts that you can view at your own time when the presentation is uploaded to the website after this event. So what do we mean by free transport, and how is transport usually funded? Well, you can see on the scale here, there's everything from pay at the point of use on the right-hand side, which is the traditional model of paying a fare when you walk onto public transport. And on the left-hand side, there's the free at the point of use example, which I understand some cities on this call are aiming towards. Within that, there are lots of different models. So we've talked about fully commercial operations. So these can be either run by the public transport operator owned by the public sector or by a private company. And these tend to be quite rare, really, where a public transport system is run completely without profit and without any subsidy from the local government or national government. What tends to happen is in some form, and in various degrees, there's some sort of subsidization of the public transport system. And this is not unusual in transport. It's not just within public transport, but our roads, our cycle lanes, all aspects of our transport system are subsidized, but some of this is not always apparent to users how much money is invested into transport on their behalf. And then I've got here what I've described as supported services. So these might be just for a short period of time. For one reason or another, a bus services gets extra support perhaps at the beginning of the service to help it get up and running, and then it moves through these different stages of perhaps being subsidized and perhaps then being able to operate commercially. So kind of the examples I'm going to give to you today are from across this different spectrum of how we finance public transport. But I'll start with some, more ordinary examples of where public transport is made free that we might often not think of. So I'm going to talk about Luxembourg briefly. They started with not doing it 7 days a week, but they started with trials on Saturdays. So this is an option for cities. Event management. So if you look at big world sports events, for example, like the Olympics in London, there was a very successful free shuttle service to some of the events to reduce congestion and road traffic. Other cities are looking at how free public transport can improve and enhance attention to equalities and safety. So traditionally, this can be done by age, so young people or old people. There's many examples of those sectors of society benefiting from free transport, but also gender and safety. So experiments in Berlin, one-off examples, but I know in other parts of the world, this is being looked at in terms of how this can provide a social dimension to our public transport services. And also, obviously, a key aspect of sustainability is the environmental imperative. So even 5 years ago in France, before a lot of the ongoing improvements to cycle infrastructure and city placemaking came along, it was acknowledged as being important and detrimental to air quality in terms of how people travelled around by car at that time. So there were 3 days where people could use public transport. I've worked on schemes where we've obliged housing developers to fund public transport for new people that have moved in who are not familiar with the public transport services and might not commit to spend their own money using them. And the same goes for workplace travel planning. By this, we mean businesses actually incentivizing their staff to travel by non-car means. There are examples of where employers have actually funded passes for public transport. Visitors, you probably yourselves have been on holiday and you've unexpectedly found that you have free public transport because you've paid some sort of hotel tax. This is another model, and there's also special cases such as in Amsterdam and some areas of Scandinavia where ferries are an indispensable way of crossing barriers in the city posed by water, and in these cases sometimes public transport is free, even when the rest of the tram and bus-based system isn't. So these are some interesting examples. If you're starting out as a city and you're thinking about making public transport free, these are some ways you can maybe experiment with the concept before actually taking the big jump and going full on with the whole public transport system. But I know we are interested in this big leap, so I'm going to talk about some well-known examples, and I won't be able to cover them all in detail, but this will give you some ideas of where you can look for further examples, and I'm sure some of these are in the book that was referenced in the initial presentation this morning. So starting with Tallinn, this is a very long-standing example that was it was started in Tallinn in 2013 and has been subsequently expanded across a lot of Estonia now, and they've achieved a public transport split of around 25%. In this example, it's not just the ability to benefit from free fares, but this is also been quoted as being important for elderly people, having freedom to go out and see people and feel as if they're part of society. At a national level, for politicians introducing these schemes, there seem to be political benefits, and for the population, this is seen as a perk to actually choose Estonia and places with this function as a benefit. Having said that, the distribution of funding itself can be difficult. How do you base this on? Do you base it on city size or public transport ridership? And also there's the need to improve public transport at the same time to ensure the new people that are using public transport actually have services that are relevant to them. I'll refer to this later, but actually if you're taking cars off the road, you do create space. And that potentially makes the road network more desirable for people that haven't used their cars before. So it's important at the same time to introduce city placemaking measures, such as what we've seen in Budapest, that at the same time you reduce car ownership and use, you actually reduce the space for cars. So it doesn't you don't have what's called these rebound effects. And having a high existing use of public transport obviously means you have a less room to make an impact when you do introduce a free fares policy. An important aspect is obviously reducing the problem, which is people using cars. And what has been seen to a certain extent in Tallinn in Estonia has been a shift from short journeys being made by active travel. So we use this as a term to mean walking and cycling. And it also obviously limits the opportunities to make revenues for further improvements going forward. A more recent example is in Luxembourg. This was introduced right at the beginning of COVID, so the outcomes of this are less well known, but it's seen as being successful so far. The interesting thing about Luxembourg, it's a country of about 600,000 people, but they have about a third extra people commuting across the border. And although these people don't benefit from the free fare for their whole journey, they do benefit from the free fare for the part of the journey that is in Luxembourg. And they have the amount of subsidy that was involved there equated to 8% of their existing annual transport budget. So they've had to find about 41 million euros per year to fund this scheme. Again, they see reputational benefits internationally and some signs of increased use, but in terms of wider knowledge about how this system has worked, then we have to wait and see to what happens in terms of increased desire for people to work from home and increased desire for people to potentially be out in the fresh air, walking and cycling instead of being on public transport. In Luxembourg, it is criticised a little bit because there's still a need for a degree of public transport improvement before this scheme is really seen as fully desirable. And related to this is that fuel prices. So the cost of running a car is still very cheap compared to other countries, other cities, and perhaps compared with public transport. I live in Freiburg in Germany, so I'm just going to provide this example, which is not a free public transport system, but it's a very effective, integrated and value for money public transport system. We have about 16% modal split for public transport here. And this involves about 20 million euros of subsidy per year, and that compares to 62 million euros in income. So just in terms of a generalized picture of the city, within 5 kilometers of the city center, we have a tram system. Primarily within about 10 kilometers, this is supported by feeder buses. So we have very, very few buses within the city center itself. It's mainly pedestrianized and for cycling. And that moving on, that's kind of this area here. And then on a 30-kilometer basis around the city, we have quite a good regional railway network. And it's possible to buy a ticket that covers all these different modes of transport. And it's supported by all sorts of different other options. So bike sharing, cargo bike sharing, electric cars, long distance rail, and we mustn't forget walking, actually a good walking network for both city and leisure uses. So this is what you can do if you kind of subsidize the fare, but you don't make it fully free, and you still have money perhaps to reinvest in a way that you don't with a fully free public transport system. But this has evolved obviously over many years, and there's lots of information about Freiburg that you can find online and which we can provide to you if you're interested. Almost finally, I'll talk about Edinburgh. This again isn't a free transport system, but it's a publicly owned, very profitable system. So this is the buses have made £43 million, which you could say about 50 million euros after over the last 10 years. And this is being used to actually build or support the building of a tram network. So you can see the congestion of buses on the main high street in Edinburgh. So obviously trams are a more efficient way of moving people. We don't have car congestion there, we have bus congestion. So actually this has built a very firm base for a high quality public transport system that is then very adaptable to better means of public transport. Vienna, I'll just touch on very quickly. This isn't free in terms of use, but it's free in terms of access. So with the technologies we have these days, it's very easy not to necessarily have ticket machines everywhere. So this is a potential cost saving. If you can still have tickets, but you don't have to have them checked everywhere, that's a cost saving aspect. There are many other examples, and you can maybe read through these and have a look at my presentation after the event that covers some of the examples we've put forward earlier. But I heard the keynote speaker reference a survey, and we've also had a survey in the UK recently, and there 25% of people said they would give up their car in exchange for free travel on public transport. And the interesting thing here, if you asked people under 24 years of age, it went up to half the people that said they would do that. So I think we also have to think about society and who the people are that we want to attract and who the existing users are. So just very briefly, final slide on the lessons. We need to think about COVID and how actually we need more space per passenger potentially on public transport in the short term, and this is potentially going to cost us more. So how do we actually fund this? The second point is we need to balance the sticks. So we need to look at ensuring the road space that we create by removing car users from the streets are given to other modes of transport, either protected through congestion charging or space allocation. We need to consider how other users might benefit from free public transport. So at the edges of the public transport system, there might be need for park and ride or active travel links. The context of the country is important. So the density, the size of the city and the country and the level of people, the self-containment. So we mean how many people work and live in the city as opposed to how many people come from outside of the city to work. The social dimension, what are our key targets for people that we want to benefit from such schemes? And being prepared. So having a bad public transport system and simply making it free and expecting people to enjoy it and use it isn't realistic. So there needs to be some upgrading and strategy for upgrading in the short, medium and longer term. Second from last, it's important to monitor schemes. So no doubt in 2 or 3 years' time, these are going to be challenged. So we have to collect data to demonstrate these have been effective. And the final point is looking at how discounted fares can be a stepping stone or an alternative to free public transport, and how different models work in different cities. And there's different studies back since the 1980s that have looked at this, for example, Sheffield in the UK. You can contact me at my ICLEI email address, and the Fast Track project that I mentioned earlier on has its own Twitter account that you're very welcome to follow. And there's lots of reading and references here, so we put some commentary here that, as I say, is too much to communicate now, but you can certainly look through those when the presentation is uploaded. I'm out of time, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'm very willing to participate in the discussion as we move forward. Thank you.
예, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much for sharing your case examples, and he has been supporting various European cities implement free public transport systems in the EU. We will talk more about this during discussion session. So, how did you like the presentations? How much rewards do you think will be necessary for you to give up on using the passenger cars? In Korea, if we implement the free public transport system, what would be your answer?
Let's move to the third presentation. For this, we are going to invite a speaker from Korean city. So, about more than 10 cities, actually making great effort in order to introduce free transportations, and they also share their willingness to expand such a policy. So in this forum, Dangjin City and Hwaseong City are participating to share their case. So in this presentation, we are going to invite a speaker from Dangjin City. So Mr. Choi Sun-mug is here. He is the Chief of Transportation of Dangjin City. So let's invite him. So hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Choi Sun-mug from Dangjin City. Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce the public transportation policies in Dangjin. It's my great pleasure indeed. Actually, sustainable eco-mobility is top agenda and one of the top priorities in Dangjin City. So actually, we want to achieve the SDG 11 and 13. Those are about reducing GHG and also have the sustainable city centered on the people. So this is the agenda of my presentation. I'd like to introduce Dangjin City, and also I'd like to touch upon transportation policies and free transportations and what have been achieved based on these policies. So first, this is about the Dangjin City. Dangjin City is located in the middle western part of the Korean peninsula. The size of Dangjin City can be compared to that of Seoul and Singapore. The population of Dangjin City is about 171,000 people. When it comes to the industrial structure, the manufacturing industry takes up 31%, and agriculture industry is 24%, and service industry is 11%. And this is a number about registration of vehicles. So as you see in this slide, within the 5 years, the number of the vehicle has been increased about 10,000 vehicles. And when it comes to the proportion of different type of vehicles, the passenger cars it takes up 75%, and the bus share is about 14.76%. And this is the transportation policies in Dangjin City. The Dangjin has a low number of buses. So the Dangjin has about 0.39 and the bus per 1,000 people. The average of Chungnam province is about 0.52 the buses per 1,000 population. So in Dangjin City, we are experiencing the aging phenomena and low births just like any other cities. So actually, mobility is a great issue indeed. When it comes to the bus the share, that is only 14.76%. That is only 1/3 of the passenger cars. And also, Dangjin City has the environmental pollution issues. So in order to resolve those problems, Dangjin came up with the sustainable and eco-friendly policies. So by promoting the public transportations, and the Dangjin City presented various programs. So let me introduce a few examples. So Dangjin is implementing the policies for free mobilities, and also in order to provide better public transportations, and we are also implementing the free transportation as well. So for free mobility, we are implementing the various programs. So let me touch upon that. In order to promote the public transportations, we have 10 circulating buses, and also we have the Happy Bus that has about 58 bus at the lines. And by introducing Happy Bus, we could successfully reduce the use of a private car. And currently, circulating bus is used by 249,000 people, and Happy Bus is used by 117,000 people. And also, we offer Happy Taxi and other special means of transportation, and those are used by 26,000 people. And we have a 6 and eco-friendly bus. And this year, we have 2 additional eco-friendly bus. And by the year 2035, the entire buses will change it to eco-friendly bus. And the eco-friendly policies will be implemented further based on the vehicles and other recharging infrastructure, the establishment. And next is about free transportations. And together with the Chungcheong-namdo province, and we are providing the free transportation to physically challenged people and the people with a national merit. And this year, for the first time, we also offer free transportation to the youth in Dangjin City as well. In the future, we want to introduce a public financed bus, so the public transportation, the uptake can be increased further. So this is more the detailed information about free transportations. So the senior citizens over 75 years old have a free bus ride. So the target population is about 50,000 people. About 12,000 people applied for that. So about 80% of the target population is enjoying these free the bus services. There is no limitation in the number of use. And starting from the 2020, we also provide this service to the people with national merit and physically challenged people. We additionally secured the 14 vehicles to provide this service. About 8,300 the people with national merit and physically challenged people are target of this policy. And out of 8,300 target population, about 1,000 people made the applications. Starting from the year 2021, as I mentioned, we offer the free bus service to the youth in the Dangjin City. So the people, the population between the 6 and 18 years old can enjoy the free service. And the target population is about 21,000 people. Currently, 9,000 people applied for this service, which takes up 42.9%. So actually, the subsidies provided to bus operators. So youth actually can recharge their bus card in convenience store in order to use this service. So this one is achievements. 26.73% of the Dangjin population is enjoying free transportation. And when it comes to number, that is about 45,000 people in Dangjin City. Based on this effort, the bus ridership has been increased. So compared to the same period of last year, the bus use increased by 30%. So the free transportation made great changes indeed in Dangjin. So that they reduced the household transportation spending. So every month, 93,000 spending has been reduced, and annually 1.1 million won has been saved in household spending by providing free bus services to youth. And I believe we can reduce the congestions, and also the students can save their spendings when they have the school excursions, and they more focus on their studies based on this support. By providing these programs, and we can enhance the city competitiveness and also can enhance citizens' mobility right, and city environment and traffic congestions can be resolved. So these are the response from the citizens in Dangjin. So overall, the citizens have a positive response. So the many citizens said they are going to use a bus more, and also that gives great benefits to reduce household transportation spendings. And students also happy about this free service. But some citizens also worry about this free service. The welfare policy can give a great burden on city, the budget and city finance. And also, some people express their concern that this will not give any benefit to reduce traffic congestions. In Dangjin City, together with the bus, the operators, we have a close collaboration. So the Dangjin bus operators give a free ride to the user under 6 years old. Previously, and in other cities, the young children can enjoy free ridership only when they are accompanied with their parents or any other. But in Dangjin City, the children under 6 can have a free ride. So anyhow, based on this, the support, and actually we are changing our transportation policy. Based on this effort, we are going to implement eco-friendly transportation policies further down the road. So the public transportation can play bigger role. So if you have any good ideas, please do share with us in this forum. Thank you. So thank you for your presentation. So like this, we invited 3 speakers in this session. So by inviting the previous speakers and also by inviting 1 additional panelist, we'd like to have a discussion session. So let's invite Andras Di Pagani from BKK. So he is in charge of urban transportation. And also we have Mr. Reggie Tricker and we have Mr. Che. And also from the Hwaseong City, we have Ms. Wun-ho. She is in charge of bus policies in Hwaseong City. So by inviting these 4 panelists, we are going to have our discussion. So let me give a microphone to Ms. Wun-ho first.
Would you make comments or ask questions to the speakers? Good afternoon. I am Wun-ho, Chief of Bus Innovation Bureau of Hwaseong City. So the topic is mobility policy implementation and resolution to the challenges. First, we need to understand Hwaseong City. Now, Hwaseong City has about 860,000 people in population, which has the largest rising population in Korea. And our Hwaseong City's land size is a quarter of that size of Seoul. And we are ranked the first in terms of the autonomy of local residents. And Hwaseong is one of the cities where people can conveniently commute from and to Seoul metropolitan area. And citizens have the strong demand for effective transportation. And in order to meet their needs, we need to have secure a huge amount of budget and effective solution. So a few years ago, we started thinking about the bus operation system improvement. First of all, we have adopted public bus operation system. It is free public transport system, and all the public bus going around in Hwaseong City are eco-friendly buses. I would like to briefly explain about the public bus operating system in the city. Metropolitan cities in Korea have bus operating system under private partnership. So until a certain level of profit is created, private companies do not offer bus operating services. So many cities have transportation systems centered around passenger cars. But Hwaseong City has adopted public bus operating system in early phases, and even in remote rural areas inside Hwaseong City, people have better access to other parts of the city as we provide free buses. Now we have about 48 bus routes under free public transport system. I will explain about the free public transport system. We ensure the rights of the citizens to travel, and in order to solve urban traffic problems and to achieve sustainable city, we are implementing free public transport system. First of all, for our youth in Hwaseong City, including adolescents. And from last October, we have provided the free public transport system for senior or the elderly people, and we're going to increase the scope of population subject to the free transport service. And we have gradually witnessed the increase in the number of cities that adopt free public transport following suit of our city. And we have achieved quite effective performance in free public transport system, and we're sure we will develop this into a sustainable transport system. In terms of administrative perspectives, we have very positive quantitative figures. And in terms of administration, we set 1-year plan every year, and we evaluate the result of our administration. And I think we need to focus on long-term performance and evaluate diverse types of performance. We shouldn't just focus on short-term outcome to truly evaluate the performance of free public transport system. Also, we need to identify the overall change in the quality of life of our citizens from social and scientific perspectives, and as well as from healthcare perspectives. And also, we need to evaluate the changes in terms of the environment when we truly evaluate the free public transport system. So, free public transport system is not the end of our efforts, but we need to move beyond the free public transport to achieve further improvement. And we will need to make efforts like the forum that we're having today. And we need to find solution to challenges through the solidarity and cooperation with many entities and people. And I hope that we will continue our cooperation with other cities around the world. Thank you very much for your brief introduction about Hwaseong City. And do you have any question to the speakers? Due to time constraint, we will need to ask you to ask questions. First of all, I have a question to Mr. Reggie from ICLEI Europe. My question is not about free public transport, but now because of COVID-19, citizens who previously used public transportation are now anxious about the spread of the virus, and people are moving towards passenger cars instead of public transportation. So compared to the time previous to COVID-19, we have a decrease in the number of people using public transport. What is the situation in Europe? And anyhow, there's a decrease in the number of people using public transport, which gives more financial burden on the government. So if you are experiencing similar things, what kind of solution do you have? Another question is related to the case in Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, there are cross-border workers who receive free transport service. Is there no challenge in offering free transport service to the cross-border workers?
My next question goes to PKK. So Budapest, the PKK is playing very important role. So how PKK is organized? So in Hwaseong City, we have a special bureaus and divisions which is in charge of trams and other public transportations. So how PKK is organized? Is there any ways to enhance the public transportation further? And I believe you have accumulated experience to promote the public transportation. So what is the organization of PKK? So is there any advice you can offer to us in order to enhance public transportation? So let's invite the speaker from PKK, and after that we are going to invite the speaker from ICLEI Europe. So the Budapest, could you go first, please?
Of course, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Well,
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I have a short introduction because Mr. Balogh all the presentation. My name is András Magany. I'm a transportation engineer and I work at the Mobility Development Department of the BKK, which is the mobility manager of the city. And Mr. Balogh has a great apology because he had a really important meeting. This is the first day of the week and he can't join right now. So yeah, I represent Budapest. About the question, I think it's a new thing in Budapest as well. We are trying to managing all the mobility modes in the city, not only the public transport, but all the other transportation modes. I hope I understand the question well and I'm answering the right way. So we are working with several public transport operators. We have operator for the trams and the metros, which is the biggest transport operator in the city. And there have also bus lines as well, but there are more bus operators in the city. But we are managing also the road operator company. We are managing the taxi companies as well. And right now we don't have exact regulation for the shared mobility services in Hungary, but we are working together with the government to creating regulation for the shared mobility solutions. And until that, we are working with the shared mobility providers, and we have a mutual agreement with them. So that's the way we are working. And if I don't answer all the aspect of the question, please ask it again, and I will try it.
예, 질문에 답이 되셨습니까? 예, 또 추가적인
So thank you for the answer. And we are maintaining our network with all these speakers, so you may ask further questions later on.
또 확인을 하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면은 우리
Then-
예, 저기 안드레스가 지금 답을 좀 주실 수 있을까요?
Andres, could you answer the question?
The status of BKK, is it the local government agency or agency right under local government, or the part of administration?
It's an own company or individual company which is owned by the municipality, and we are, I guess, we are working in a business way, or I don't know how I can say it, but yeah, this is an individual company, and we are between the municipality and the exec operators and mobility providers and all of this kind of companies.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it's like if you know better, the BKK was built as the Transport for London company. It was the I don't know, the aim that in Budapest we would like to have a similar company than they're having in London.
예, 고맙습니다. 자, 그러면은 그 다음 답은
Thank you. Next, Mr. Reggie Triker, would you answer her question?
Yes, and I'd start by emphasizing this fact that this does seem to be the most effective model of public transport, to have what we call a third party or an arm's length organization connected to the local authority that adopts free public transport solutions. I'd say in terms of COVID, we're still at a relatively early stage in knowing how people will rebound. I think one mistake that was made was reducing public transport at the beginning of the pandemic, and that created overcrowding and less space, whereas what we need to do now is almost invest and increase public transport to make it reassuring for people that they have space. I've seen various different technological solutions for disinfectant, for example, that can be used. So I think we're still treading water, but obviously overcrowded public transport wasn't really desirable even before COVID. You know, sites of people being crammed onto buses and trains was something we were used to, but it wasn't ever a great human experience. So we have to find a way that's better to go back to, and certainly some of the pilot active travel schemes for walking and cycling, these should be seen as a complement to public transport rather than in competition to public transport, and administrations that can look at these across the board. I think maintaining some of the infrastructure that's been put in place for for cycling to enable public transport to work more effectively in the future is a good way forward. In terms of the Luxembourg aspect, I think in terms of people that are working in the city but not living in the city benefiting, then the economic benefits to the city of having people coming into the city to work, I think, are recognised. Obviously, these workers support city centres, they shop, they probably also pay their income taxes through work. So it's a different kind of perspective. It's seeing value not just in terms of the public transport system, but the value of public transport in enhancing the economy and well-being of the entire city and country. So this is at the end of my presentation, I said this is definitely something to look at how much of that cross-border commuting is actually occurring in any one area, and if you can take a regional approach to bring in other cities and towns that are supplying the workforce for a specific area, I think this could be a better solution rather than just having a city with one policy and lots of suburban or rural areas with a different policy. So this is what we'd encourage to be looked at and taken forward.
예, 감사합니다. 여러분들께서 어떠신가요? 그 예상했던 질문.
So,
예상했던 답변이 전부 충족이
well, do you
되셨나요?
have any other expected questions? And actually, we want to have a further discussion, but time is limited. We want to have a further discussion, but time is limited. So we cannot have a further discussion. But actually, we have some questions on online platform. But, well, I'd like to just share the questions rather than invite answers. So Mr. Ahmed Hassan actually raised the question. So equality related the question has been written on the online platform. So there are some inequalities when it comes to the transportation policy. So are there any other ways to resolve this? This is one question. And actually, while Tallinn case was introduced in one presentation, free transportation was introduced. So as a result of the analysis of a Tallinn case, the transportation and the transition should be implemented by reducing the number of private car ownership, so many people can use the public transportations. But I believe Tallinn failed to reduce the number of private the cars. So that is the analysis anyhow. And actually, in order to have the better mobilities, it is also important to reduce the GHG, greenhouse gases. But there is no the detailed discussions about GHG reduction, so there was comment about that. But anyhow, we cannot have further discussions about this. So, if time allows, in the next session, we are going to have discussions about that. So, in the Korea, in order to have the net zero, various initiatives are implemented in many cities. And actually, Dangjin City and Hwaseong City are making great effort, but they have different approaches because they have different situations. And the Europe cities have different approaches, which is fitting in their own situation. So the transportation and the innovations, and that can have some contributions for net zero. And also, it is important to reduce the inequalities when it comes to the mobility in our effort. So in this session, many different cities actually shared the great ideas, and by reducing the car ownerships and by increasing the use of public transportations, things, we can make some changes anyhow. And when it comes to the mobility right, and we can consider the equal approaches as well. So there are many things we should consider. So this, even though time is limited, we had the meaningful time in this session. So in the following session, and we are going to have a further discussions. We are going to invite a speaker from the European side, and also we are going to invite one speaker from Korean side. We are going to have further discussions in the following the session. So the speaker from Dangjin and Mr. Lozzi Tricker and Mr. Andras Fagani from PKK and Ms. Yeon-hee, thank you so much for sharing your insightful ideas. Well, I'm sorry not giving enough time to share your ideas. But anyhow, and all of you and all of us actually have the close network, so we can have further the discussions in continuous way. And if you have any questions, you can post your questions on the online platform, so we can address your questions when time is allowed. Even though we cannot have further discussions, we can continue our talks even after this forum. So from Dangjin and from Budapest and from the ICLEI Europe, we have a great speaker, so thank you so much. So, and also we have many the audience from online platform, so my special thanks go to all the audiences as well. And we are going to have a short break, and after that we are going to have the next session. Well, meantime, please post your questions on the online platform. Thank you so much. We are going to have a 10-minute break. Thank you. Have you enjoyed the break time? Now, we will start the last session of the forum. In this session, we will have policy dialogue. In this session, we will listen to the presentation from a Korean speaker and another presentation from the EU speaker. And we will listen to their presentations about each region's policies and then have dialogue. So we are looking at this topic from policy perspectives, from local government perspectives, what kind of efforts are being made in Korea. And in Europe, you listen to the case examples of European cities. Then, from the EU perspective, what kind of urban mobility policies are being implemented in European cities? So, we will listen to presentations about this topic from policy perspectives. The first presentation will be made by the person, the co-organizer of this forum. So let's invite Mayor of Hwaseong City first, and he's going to introduce his the policies towards the public the transportation innovation. So let's invite Mayor Cheol-mo up to the stage. Hello, I'm Mayor of the City of Hwaseong, Cheol-mo. I'd like to extend the greetings to EU Climate Action and MLEAD member cities, and ICLEI members, and eco-mobility experts and citizens who are participating in EU-Korea Urban Mobility Forum. It is a pleasure and honor to share the policy of Hwaseong City today. Transport-related greenhouse gas emissions is constantly increasing. Is the vehicle-centered transportation policy environmentally correct? Now is the time to think about policies befitting the status of the city and its social responsibility. With free transportation, if citizens uptake buses instead of personal cars, there will be fewer vehicles on the road. Naturally, greenhouse gas emissions will also decrease. The road congestion will be lower, reducing the need for new road constructions. Free transportation is not just all about free bus policy, net bus for net zero. It is our first step to realize 2050 carbon neutrality. It is difficult to start free transportation in a large city with a population of 900,000. However, the positive response from citizens and media is empowering our effort. The wave of free transportation continues in Sinan County, Cheongsang County, Dangjin City, Ansan City, reflecting their own conditions. We will carry on the sea shift to the right direction, embracing huge wave of changes. The idea behind free transportation is to go for car-free city. However, as it is difficult to realize carbon neutrality right away, it is difficult to become car-free city right away. So we are making a city with easy mobility. Hwaseong City is 1.4 times wider than the capital Seoul. It takes more than 1 hour by car to travel from east to west. As such, the private ownership is high and the share of public transportation is low. By 2030, all buses will be changed into eco-friendly and self-driving buses. Transportation, the plan needs to be changed so that bus route can be more densely planned. On rural road, bus route is as long as 100 kilometers. It should be much shorter, like 30 kilometers. Today, we need to move from mass production of small items to small quantity production of diverse items. We no longer have to rely on big buses that consume a lot of fuel. Last year, we signed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the local motors. By producing bus with a 3D printer, the production cost has been significantly lowered. Public transportation will be changed, and demand-based buses with autonomous driving technology can be witnessed in the near future. Car sharing is already commonly found. However, the private ownership is still high. Our city also buys car every year. How about public sector moves first to build a system that shares a car without owning it? Recently, Hwaseong City signed eco-friendly future public vehicle agreement with Kia Motors. The essence of this agreement is for public officials to use these vehicles during business hours and before and after business hours. These vehicles can be used by employees and citizens to commute. The entire fleet will be e-vehicle produced at Hwaseong plant of Kia Motors. By 2030, Hyundai Motor will stop producing internal combustion engines. It is planning to replace it with eco-friendly vehicle gradually. Our city has built eco-friendly infrastructure such as hydrogen battery power plant and hydrogen charging station. The role of the public sector is to induce transition to eco-friendly ecosystem without negatively affecting automotive industry. We can't stop private ownership right away, but initiate our effort to make a transition from private ownership to car sharing, from internal combustion engines to eco-friendly vehicles. To ensure the safety of pedestrians first, the speed limit area area below 30 kilometers will continue to increase as the car use becomes more uncomfortable. Working or using public transportation becomes more convenient. In such a way, we will gradually change to eco-mobility city that we are aiming for. The bus system can be a barometer to judge fairness of the city. It is because a vehicle that carries more people need to have a right to receive more consideration on the road. In that sense, bus system is the barometers that shows the fairness of the city. Walking and cycling are eco-mobility in real sense. In addition to taking a bus, we are introducing green point system for citizens who work and ride a bicycle. Green point can be converted to local currency when it exceeds a certain amount. One can work and bike in a neighborhood, and by doing so, even contribute to revitalize the local economy. What we should do is to find a way to make our planet healthy and promote it as a policy and create a city where one enjoys to work. There are people without a driving license or who are not able to use personal mobility. Our city is already implementing the public financed bus system. Late-night buses are running throughout Hwaseong City. With the sufficient bus line expansion, buses will run from early morning to late night. Our city operates public personal mobility by adding hydrogen electric trams in Hwaseong City. Eco-mobility system will be established. In eco-mobility, public transportation will be used instead of a private car for long-distance travel, and foot bicycle and personal mobility for near-distance travel. Roads are no longer the place where cars have a priority. It will turn into the place where all citizens can travel freely and safely. We are taking the baby step now. The Hwaseong City will move fast. Thank you. Thank you. So actually, the mayor of Hwaseong City attentively listened what all other speakers have to say, and also he delivered the presentation.
I'd like to invite the second speaker for the session. As we prepare for this forum, we told you that the EU has set up a guideline called SUMP for European cities. That's what is written in the agenda of the forum. What is SUMP? For the European local governments, the EU provides SUMP as a policy guideline. So we want to know more about SUMP. The second speaker will explain about what SUMP is. From POLIS Network, we have Mr. Giacomo Lozzi, the Senior Project Manager. Here you hear the organization name POLIS. POLIS is the network participated by the basic and metropolitan governments across Europe. The EU and POLIS network conduct various projects in European cities. And POLIS network plays the role of the bridge between the EU central government and the local governments of European cities. Mr. Giacomo Lozzi, would you start your presentation? Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, 잘 들립니다.
Yes, we hear you.
I hope. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank you, the organizers, for inviting me and POLIS to join this very interesting forum. And thanks for the presentation of the mayor. It was really inspiring. So as you said, my name is Giacomo Lozzi, and I'm a senior project manager at POLIS, which is the network of cities and regions working on transport innovation in Europe. We have around 80 members from all over Europe, and we closely support them in shaping their sustainable urban mobility policies. So you see that urban mobility accounts for 40% of all CO2 emissions of road transport in Europe, and up to 70% of other pollutants from transport. So there's really a challenge here to tackle, and the local level has to do this for decarbonization. But there are many other challenges as well related to air pollution, related to congestion. And so we need to resolve the traffic jams as well as to make our streets safer, especially for vulnerable road users. So these issues, decarbonization, improving air quality, modal shifts, and improving safety are really steering the urban mobility policies of European cities. So at the same time, we have seen that many innovations and new technologies have been coming our way in cities. And at the same time, there's a fear of missing out of cities that see this innovation coming and they want to embrace these technologies. But it's important to remind that these need to be a means to an end and not an end on themselves. So they need to come with solutions that help us to address the challenges that we were discussing before. The public sector generally has different functions related to the provision of regulation, the management of transport services, like contract transport services and traffic management, and provision of travel information. Originally, all these services were controlled by the public sector, and now these tasks are seeing an expanding role for the private sector and other third parties. For example, the new market for mobility services like car sharing, bike sharing, and carpooling have seen a substantial growth in third-party players. Open data management has led to a stronger role for app developers and digital companies in providing information services for travelers that have also changed their expectations for a more user-centric approach. And the growth of this connected mobility means that local authorities are no longer the main data holders. There are all these utility companies, communications industry, and vehicle manufacturers that often have a better picture of the state of the transport network. So this makes the line between public and private more blurred. At the same time, all this new data generated can help public authorities to move towards more data-driven and evidence-based decision-making. So it is important to get a clearer picture of the actual impact of urban mobility services on the mobility ecosystem in order to efficiently manage urban space. Indeed, cities are more and more becoming urban space managers, and indeed, urban space is scarce and very valuable, and therefore it's also a very powerful tool in the hands of public authorities. Indeed, by taking space away from one mode and giving more space to another mode, you can really decide as a public authority which transport mode you want to prioritize. And you can also put a price on space, and space polluters should pay accordingly. But you can also more dynamically start to manage the curbsides, for example, and give different functions to the curbsides depending on the time of the day and the needs of the moment in time. For for example, ranging from deliveries or dedicated bus lanes, depending on the moment of the day. These are all examples on how the regulation of innovation is instrumental in a way that we maximize the opportunities brought by the new technologies, but also mitigate possible negative externalities. This public sector oversight is important to align innovation with public policy goals. For all these reasons, it's very important that public sector maintains a coordinating role, although constantly involving the private stakeholders in transport planning and management. And local authorities are the only ones that can guarantee a holistic vision of all mobility services with the ability to assign the priorities and integrate them according to the targets and objectives. But I also guarantee a neutral approach, for example, for the management and the use of personal and private data. And they pursue the collective well-being of all citizens and business active in that area. So all this is quite easy to say, but it's more complicated to put into practice. What is important is to stress that in each urban context, there's a unique situation, and therefore the objectives and measures must be defined at the local level with the local community. However, there's a path to take to reach these targets, and this can be shared with other cities, supporting each other and working with the industry sector to accelerate the transition towards sustainable and efficient mobility systems. Therefore, the message here is not so much the destination as it is the journey. Local authorities should collaborate with each other and with stakeholders to define together the pathway and the roadmap to implement their vision. But how do cities do it in practice? As you correctly mentioned, if we want to have integrated packages of measures that really tick several goals in one go and address these challenges all at the same time, we need the help of sustainable urban mobility plans, which is a tool that has been promoted heavily by the European Commission, but also by POLIS for their members, as a way to adopt a long-term and integrated vision for sustainable mobility that also goes beyond the political election cycles and really allows you to develop integrated packages of measures and integrated approaches. The definition of a sustainable urban mobility plan is a strategic plan designed to satisfy the mobility needs of people and businesses in cities and their surroundings for better quality of life, and it builds on existing planning practice and takes due consideration of integration, participation, and evaluation principles. So these plans are not limited to solutions to traffic-related congestion, but enlarge the scope to improve the quality of life, and they refer mainly to accessibility rather than transport. So the access to services and goods rather the right to move it on itself. This is the planning cycle of a SAMP. As you see, it is an iterative process that constantly starts and ends and restarts again, because you start with preparation, then strategy development, then planning measures, implementing, monitoring, and then refining the process and starting again. So it's important to stress this cycle that is continuously going on. And we see that several of cities in Europe have developed and are implementing these plans and have set clear targets in terms of modal shift away from the private car, but also clear targets in terms of climate neutrality with time horizons around 2030 or even 2050. So as I said before, beyond the political cycles. Then we had also COVID-19, and maybe this was the biggest disruptor of all over the last year. And we really need to avoid now moving from lockdown to gridlock. As it was mentioned by the previous speakers, this is a risk, but at the same time, we have a window of opportunity to avoid this to happen and that public transport collapses and that car is considered the ultimate safety bubble. But we can rather capitalize on the opportunities brought by this crisis. And we see that this might be a life-changing moment where people are open to change and to change the behavior and try new things. So we have a huge sandbox through the temporary interventions that we introduced, that cities have introduced over these months. And it can be very powerful to nudge people to make the steps for the future in favor of an integrated, multimodal, sustainable urban mobility ecosystem. So to conclude, let me say that there's no silver bullet, but we need this integrated and combined approach of different measures as promoted by the SAMP guidelines. And we need the carrots as well as the sticks. So that means an integrated planning vision with clear targets. We need packages of measures with multiple benefits, a cross-sectoral approach, the governance of innovation through regulation, but also very important, we need cooperation between different levels of government. In Europe, our cities need to be empowered by the member states and by the European level in order to reach the ambitions that we have set in Europe as well. So I would like to thank you very much, and I look forward to joining the panel with the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have now listened to the presentations from the two speakers. Now we'd like to have dialogue with our panel discussants. First of all, I will introduce to you the panel discussants. First, Mr. Cheol-mo, the mayor of Hwaseong City. And I would like to introduce to you those who are on site with us. We have Dr. Kim Sun-kyu, the researcher from Korea Institute of Science and Technology Evaluation and Planning. And we have Mr. Beyoung-kyu, the civilian member of Hwaseong Tram system. And we have Mr. Giacomo Lozzi, the senior project manager from POLIS network. And we have Mr. Konrad Otto Zimmermann from the creative director from the Urban Idea. He was also the Secretary General of ICLEI Europe. Especially, he was in charge of the eco-mobility of ICLEI. So creative director of eco-mobility as well. So we are going to have policy dialogue with these speakers and panel discussants. We'd like to start the discussion, first of all, by listening to the comments from Mr. Konrad Otto Zimmermann.
So let me give a microphone to Mr. Konrad Otto Zimmermann.
잠깐만요. 지금 마이크가
So mic is off, so
꺼져 있어서
could you
소리가
turn
밖으로 안
on
나고
microphone?
오고 있는데요. 예, 됐습니다. 예.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to address you in this round this afternoon. And the topic is very important because we know that the transport sector is one of the few sectors in Europe, even the sector that is still not reducing CO2, but actually still where the CO2 emissions are still increasing. I have prepared a little presentation to support what I am going to say, and I hope you can see it now. The presentations so far have been very interesting, and I support the other speakers in emphasizing that we need to take a systemic approach to improving transport conditions in our cities, because mobility is a very basic function of people's lives, and urban transport is a complex system which is very much interrelated with other policy fields. Therefore, I think we must refrain from pursuing a single goal or a single approach only. We need to combine even the goal net zero with significant improvements, for example, for street space to become livable and safe, and for transport to become pleasant. So what does it mean? It means we need to disarm urban transport by planning for and incentivize downsized vehicles and go for fine mobility instead of the very big cars and units we have in our streets today. We need, now my presentation gets stuck. I'm sorry, the slide does not move forward. Now it's there. We need to decrease the number of private vehicles that are operated and also parked in the city by discouraging private ownership and encouraging car sharing. And my colleagues, Giacomo, Lozzi, and also Reggie have emphasized that we need to take a carrot and stick approach. We need certainly to decelerate urban speed, generally to 50 kilometers on arterial roads, 30 kilometers per hour on all other roads and streets with separated sidewalks citywide, and 20 kilometers per hour on mixed-use spaces where pedestrians and cars are allowed and cyclists are allowed to take one shared space. And we need to effect a model shift from private motor vehicle to public transport. I think this has been emphasized many times by you, Mr. Mayor, and others. But how do we do this? It's important to ask the question, why? For example, why are we going for free public transport? Is it just a welfare aspect, so that public transport should be affordable for the poor? And if so, why wouldn't we then just provide free passes, free tickets to people in need? Why to everybody? Or is it because we want to save the environment and protect the climate? Then we need to get people from the car into public transport. But if so, are we really sure that the fare, the ticket price, is the main barrier against the use of public transport? Or are there any other reasons why we should go for free public transport? Let me emphasize the importance of understanding the barriers and seeing a cascade of barriers. For example, if these people on the left-hand side are not taking the bus as we want them to do, is it the price of the fare that hinders them? Maybe. So then we introduce free public transport. So we remove one of the barriers. But then we see still people do not enter the bus. Why? Maybe many of them say there are too many transfers. They have to change buses or change from metro to bus and from the bus again to metro too many times. So it's very inconvenient. So, okay, then we say we remove this barrier by providing more direct connections. So we create more bus lines that go in different directions so that people don't have to change buses too often. But then still, people may not enter the bus. They still may drive the car. Why? Many of them will say the whole duration of the trip is too long, because the bus stops at every bus stop and it's a very slow process. So it takes a lot of time. Okay, then we say we improve that. We make an acceleration program wherever the bus approaches traffic crossing. Then we will give the bus green light. So the bus automatically switches to green light so that the bus can run in an accelerated mode. And we reduce the number of bus stops, or we create more direct lines so that the trip goes faster. Still, people may not shift to the bus. Why? Many of them will say, oh, it's too crowded. There is such a bad air inside the vehicle. It is too densely packed. So it's just inconvenient. I don't get a seat. I have to stand. So that's not really good. So then we put more modern buses in place, more buses so that they are not overcrowded. But still, people may not use the bus. Why? There might be the bad image. Bus is more for those who cannot afford a car, or more for the poor, more for simple people. So I'm proud. I want to be seen as somebody who is earning a lot of money and is rich enough to actually afford a car. So then we try to do an image campaign, and the mayor is a good example and goes by bus and never by car anymore. So to give a good example, so we create the best image, and finally we may end up with a success. People will take the bus, to take the public transport. What I want to say is we have to have a whole cascade of barriers in mind. If we only go for one single improvement, it may have little effect. So we have to see all the barriers that prevent people from taking public transport and solve it all as an entire system. This I mean by systemic approach. And then we need to mind the effects of free public transport. It could be an incentive for pedestrians to give up walking and then to take the bus instead. But this would not be desirable since walking is good for health. Similarly, people who are taking the bicycle today could say, oh, bus is free, so let me take the bus. So they would give up cycling, but this would be undesirable since also cycling is good for health. And it could lead trains and buses to be more crowded because more people would take the free public transport. They would be stuck in sticky air and actually not really like it. Probably not in Korea, but in other countries, there might be homeless people who prefer to spend their days and nights in trains and buses to enjoy a warmth and shelter rather than to stay outside. So you might have to deal with people who are just sitting in the bus all day and night because it's just a free, warm space. And of course, free public transport reduces the funding base for public transport because it needs full subsidies from public budgets. And that money you don't have for other improvements to effect the change we all want. So I will end just with a vision of eco-mobility with small, light individual vehicles in a street that is seeing no cars, but just eco-friendly transport mode. Thank you very much for your attention.
예, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Innovation of public transport system and transition towards free public transport. So he has explained very well about the things we should never miss to achieve these targets. And thank you again for your presentation. We also have a civilian member of Hwaseong City Tram project group. First of all, Mr. Choi Beyoung-kyu, would you make comments first? So I'm going to make comments from a citizen's perspective From a citizen's perspective, it's not easy to understand what we're talking about here. So I'm going to make my points from a citizen's perspective. I go to work every day by bicycle, and I walk every day. Every day I walk about 18,000 steps. So I became healthier, and I am proud of doing that because I am making efforts for cleaner environment in my country. Among sustainable mobility, the best one is walking. Walking is part of eco-mobility, and in order to activate the use of various mobilities such as electricity and bicycle, we need policies to innovate public transport system and speed reduction policy, and the policy to reduce the use of cars on the road. These policies are needed to truly vitalize sustainable urban mobilities. At the center of the public transportation system, we have tram and public bus and free public transport system implemented by Hwaseong City. I think that guaranteeing the freedom to mobility or the freedom to travel for the citizens or residents living in villages where there is no public bus routes will be the true innovation in the public transportation system. Hwaseong Dongtan district developed the Public Transportation System Development Plan. 6 years after residents moved into the new apartments in the district of Hwaseong City, the city started to discuss the establishment of Tram. And with the establishment of Tram, we will be able to see the implementation of free public town bus services. And I believe that Hwaseong City will be able to become low-carbon sustainable city. Hwaseong City should continuously develop policies to support sustainable urban mobility so that it could become carbon neutral and sustainable city. Across the world, the biggest cause of death for population aged 15 to 29 is traffic accident, and traffic accident will be the largest cause of death for children aged 4 to 15. A good city is the city where you can enjoy walking. A city where you can walk vitalizes the local community and promotes the health of the citizens. For example, in São Paulo in Brazil, they have governance manager to improve the mobility around the areas of school, and they're engaging students and parents. For example, they identify the elements of safer routes of commuting to and from school, and they are establishing safe roads for the users. In the future, urban transport system must have inclusivity. In other words, it should include children, women, people with disabilities, and the elderly. And it should also control the use of passenger cars so that safer and cleaner environment could be prepared. For that, we need to adopt BRT, metro, tram, cable car, bicycles, road, and walking as the eco-mobility of the city. For that, we will need to secure relevant financial resources and apply technological advancement. But what is the most important thing here in our effort? The most important thing is to transform the culture around the citizens. We need to take cultural approach to the eco-mobility. In order to make the city transport greener and activate the use of public transport, we need to take innovative policies and allocate proper budget for eco-mobility. And Hwaseong City is implementing free public transport policies, and the policy needs to be implemented in a way to improve the mobility, safe mobility of students, children, and the elderly. I would like to make several proposals for net zero and for Hwaseong City. First of all, we must have proper transport policy for free public transport system. And as part of public transport system, we need to vitalize the eco-mobility such as tram, walking, and cycling. In order to make transition from car-centered road to eco-mobility, we need sustainable urban mobility and relevant transport policies. Fourthly, we need to manage transportation nodes. And fifthly, as for new transport means such as tram, we need to prepare transport systems so that new eco-mobility such as tram will firmly establish itself as the key means of transport in the public transportation system. And we need to engage citizens and the local community in the vision of eco-mobility. And Hwaseong City is soon going to launch a smartphone application named Tranquil, which makes an integrated operation of green points for the citizens to establish eco-mobility. And I have high expectation for that. Thank you very much for your comments. You said that you don't know well about this topic, but you mentioned, but you made points that are very important to us. Thank you for your comments.
We have another panelist, so let's invite the Dr. Kim Sung-kyo from Korea Institute of Science and Technology Evaluation and Planning. Actually, Mr. Choi shared a great idea, so he is a difficult person to follow. Actually, I live in 5 minutes from this venue, so this is great experience personally. So I think about what is the meaning of a city, what is the meaning of public transportations. So, The Palace of People is the book I recently read. So in this book, the importance of the social infrastructure is emphasized. So social infrastructure make a great contribution in enhancing connectivity among different people in our society. Based on this connectivity, we have the development of a given city. And I believe the transportations and the library plays a very important role in order to enhance connectivity. So, this library is the first public building which achieved net zero. So this is an appropriate place to have this forum. So as it was emphasized in the book I read, the polarizations in our society actually should be reduced by having better connectivity. So by experiencing COVID-19, and we are experiencing our own weak point. So it is important to have concerted approaches and concerted effort. So we realize that experience COVID-19. When we talk about climate changes, some believe this is a far away issues and this is an issue of someone else. But that is not true. So climate change is experienced by all of us, and the climate change is actually the current issue, the here and now issue. That's why we should make a great effort in order to address climate change issues in order to secure our own right. So the Hwaseong City is making great effort in order to address these issues. And Hwaseong City is making effort in order to enhance connectivity of the community. Hwaseong City introduced free transportation, which is a very timely measure indeed. And by reducing the traffic and the road traffic, the traffic accidents can be reduced and further road construction can be reduced as well. That is a very good point indeed. The future technology can be adapted further to provide a better service. And rather than this is just one of the program. In a continuous manner, this free transportation program can be implemented in the continuous way, and free transportation will be first step for net zero. The car-free city is the ultimate goal, but I believe that is a very ambitious goal indeed. So Hwaseong City has a vast land area. That's why people who are living in this city need the private car ownership. But the Hwaseong made a bold approaches in order to reduce the car ownership. And well, as a part of that, the free transportation has been introduced. So financially, it can be supported in Hwaseong City, and as I said, that is a very timely policies. Carbon neutrality, net zero is a way to go. Even though we have a very clear objective, very clear goal, but we do not have a clear the means to achieve that. So, well, just the policy makers want to put this agenda behind because they cannot see the clear ways to achieve that. So Hwaseong City and other the leading cities are making effort and presenting the feasible ways to achieve that. And also it is important to embrace participation of citizens, and also it is crucial to take the new and the technologies. Based on that, the visible outcomes, tangible outcomes can be witnessed. I believe we can hear more from the mayor later. Thank you. So, listening what panelists they have to say, I thought the following. Actually, rather than panelists, present a new idea, and that they agree that this free transportation can be great policy tools. So in order to achieve the equalities and in order to achieve net zero, and we can use free transportation as a meaningful tool. So what should be addressed further? We should think about that down the road. So before we invite the panelists, I'd like to share the questions on the online platform. So regarding SUMP, every year in the every year the SUMP city is selected. The EU is doing the SUMP, Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, and I believe SUMP has some meaningful result. So how do you evaluate the achievement made by SUMP? So when it comes to the mobility transitions, and do you believe SUMP made great achievements? And in order to have a further achievement, what is required further down the road? So that is one question. So let's invite Mr. Giacomo Lozzi to address this question. And there are many other questions on the online platform. So the mobility enhancement and free transportation, in order to achieve that, a lot of budget is required. So is there any new idea to solve financial the constraints? So any ideas to resolve the budget issues regarding free transportation? So let's invite Mr. Giacomo Lozzi to address this question. And after that, I'd like to invite Mr. Konrad Otto Zimmermann. And also, we'd like to invite other the panelists, and the Hwaseong City mayor also will share his own ideas regarding these questions later. First, regarding SUMP and European local government's performance, would you answer the question?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Very interesting indeed. So the idea behind the SUMP Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan guideline is to provide from the side of the European Union a coordinated approach to cities for sustainable policies in the framework of urban transport. So, as I said before, it is important to understand that these guidelines don't provide themselves measures, but they provide for a process so that cities can learn and understand how the process of planning should be implemented. And this includes a very important section on monitoring and evaluation of the measures. So it's very important that once the measures are defined based on a vision, they are constantly monitored and at the end evaluated, both from the local authority perspective, but also including evaluation of citizens and industry. And then the cycle that I showed before starts again based on the evaluation. So the city, the local authority has to define some KPIs, key performance indicators that allow to assess if a measure has brought benefits or it has been detrimental. And this can happen. So it's important that the package of measures then is defined based on this evidence-based approach and not on ideological approach. In terms of what can be improved in the future, and also very much linked to the topic of today, is the integration of the mobility plans with other type of plans, for example, energy plans of the city. We are seeing now that cities that promote electromobility, for example, have to take into account the production of the energy and the provision of the energy, especially when it comes to freight, for example. That if you want to a big company to have a fully electric fleet, they have to recharge it, but they have to have access to the energy, and the energy grid has to be improved. So it's very important for the future that these plans are integrated in a better way.
예, 고맙습니다.
So thank you so much. So actually, local government policy is very important and crucial, and also the solution should be searched to be fitting in the local situations. So the local governments are implementing various policies, and in organic manner, many different policies should be interconnected rather than you implement policies in silo manner. So let's invite but before inviting the Mr. Zimmermann, there is another question regarding the presentation material. So presentation material is available on the website. And how about the video clip? That was the question. So Korea, EU, the climate action, and the ICLEI Korea, the website offer this video clip. So please do watch the program again. And also in the website, and you can make a suggestion. So please do provide suggestions so that we can provide better the programs. Let's invite Mr. Zimmermann then. So your mic is off, so could you turn on your mic?
if we want to really have a change and a shift from the private car to public transport, then we should be aware of the fact that the city is already subsidizing the car and the system of cars heavily by road construction, by road maintenance, and so on. So all the research that I have seen shows that local authorities are subsidizing the system of roads and cars heavily. And now, if we provide free public transport, it would mean that we subsidize public transport against the already subsidized system of streets and cars. And the question is if this is an economic use of public funds. So my proposal would be to provide free public transport in a targeted way. For example, to offer families who give up their car free public transport for a year or for 2 years or for 5 years. Or to discuss with employers, with companies, that instead of providing a parking place on the site of the company, they would provide a free public transport ticket to their employees, so that each individual has actually to take a decision whether to stay with the car or take public transport when it's more economical. I think this would maybe lead to a better result with an economical use of public funds. So this is my suggestion, but just from an international experience point of view. I don't know whether this can apply to your city, Mr. Mayor, but I just wanted to have this proposed. Thank you.
고맙습니다. 굉장히 재미있지만 굉장히
Well, that is quite interesting but very challenging, the question indeed. Well, are there any person who want to provide additional suggestions? So, Dr. Kim Sung-kyu? So listening what other speakers have to say, actually energy policies and transportation policies should go hand in hand. But I believe the education policy should be integrated as well. Free transportation, that should be offered to students. And I believe that is very meaningful. Well, if we provide free transportations and to socially vulnerable people, that has its own meaning. But in order to make changes in the future, it is important to provide free transportation to our next generation. So by offering free transportation to the students, we can make great changes in the future that will make great contributions in the public transportation transitions. So the education policies should be integrated together with the transportation policy. The students have new ideas and new perspective. Okay, thank you so much. In order to enhance the next generation's understanding, it is important to have the education policy integrated with others. So we want to have additional questions and suggestions, but time is limited. So this is a time to wrap up. This forum is organized in Hwaseong City, and the main topic is free transportations and the mobility transitions. So the mayor of Hwaseong City listened attentively what others have to say, and also he received many questions. Well, rather than just answering and addressing all the questions, and well, you can share what you are the thinking about today's discussions. So let me give a microphone to Mayor of Hwaseong City. So, for the last few hours, many people participated in this forum. So we should think about what is the essence of today's discussions. As I said in my presentation, what is a better way to pursue? And also we should think about the visible and the tangible ways. And this is the journey. We should go together in this journey in order to achieve common goals and common objectives. objectives. And while all the speakers and panelists share the same ideas, we have the same common goal. Even though we have different approaches and even though we have different methodologies, and we cannot say, well, this is wrong and this is right. And well, just we have different ways. And well, Europe and Korea have different these situations, and that's why we should have different approaches. In European cities, there is the high bicycle ridership, but in Korea, and we just enjoy bicycling. We do not heavily use bicycle in order to commute every day. And Korea has the compact economic developments, so the speed is very important. Just move fast by using the personal car, and that has been the concept and a kind of culture in Korea. We are talking about the 2050 net zero. That is important, but in this process, we should consider various the aspect, including the resolving the polarization issues in our society. In the future, new technology, artificial intelligence will be adopted, and well, also job the securities cannot be secured. So rather than we only think about speed in this situation, we should think about the better futures. I'm not arguing which the chicken is first and egg is first. And well, what is important thing is we should have a small practice, and we should have these small steps forward. So by implementing our plans and the actions, and we can well experience trials and errors in the process, we can have a better the outcomes and better results. So when we have a heavy investment in free transportations, and there will be neglected areas, but well, by having this free transportation, so we can have the tangible result. And free transportation is the journey towards the eco-mobility. And we want to have a car-free city. That is the ultimate goal. And well, we are now in the stage of errors and trials. So I'd like to collect ideas and opinions from many different stakeholders. So the ideas collected today will be reviewed in Hwaseong City, and also we are going to raise many questions, and this will be the journey to find answer to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. As the mayor emphasized, so by hearing his tone and his comments, I can see how seriously the city is taking this issue. And now we're in the journey towards the policy transition, and all people who love Hwaseong City will join the mayor's efforts to make the city a sustainable city. And important policy tools to achieve net zero will be the free public transport system, and that is one of our tasks to be completed. So the mayor of Hwaseong made closing comments, and I think many of you would agree with what he said. And you listened to the case examples of cities in Europe conducting free public transport systems. We have a network of cities that wish to become a city that implements free public transport system. There are various policies and measures, but in order to make our city's transport system a sustainable one, we may face a lot of challenges, because that is closely related to the daily lives of our citizens. And also there are many stakeholders involved in this process. So we need to be able to coordinate various interests involved in this process. And this effort requires a large amount of budget. And in order to solve this issue and solve challenges, we need support and understanding from our citizens. We held this forum in Hwaseong City, but I think other cities that wish to become innovative, sustainable ones may share what we have discussed today. And also, I believe many other European cities may share what we have discussed today. So I think that our mobility transition policy to achieve net zero will be the centerpiece of our urban mobility policies. I'd like to ask for your strong support and interest and participation in this effort. Thank you very much for staying with us for this forum. And thank you, Mr. Giacomo Lozzi. Thank you, Mr. Konrad Otto Zimmerman. And thank you, Mayor of Hwaseong and other distinguished panelists. We have had this forum for 3 hours, and thank you all the participants. And as you downloaded the presentation materials from our website went down for the time being, but now it's recovered. It shows that you are so much interested in this topic. I hope more citizens will be interested in this topic, and I'd like to ask for your support again for this effort. Let me close this forum. Thank you very much.